16,000 men. One day. Zero water. On July 4th, 1187, the largest Christian army ever assembled in the Holy Land ceased to exist, not because they were outnumbered, but because their enemy never let them drink. In 6 hours, Saladin captured a king, destroyed 3 military orders, seized Christianity's holiest relic, and erased a kingdom that had stood for 88 years. Within 4 months, Jerusalem, the prize of the First Crusade, would fly Muslim banners again. But here's what no one tells you. The Crusaders didn't lose at Hattin. They were already dead before the battle even started. This is the story of how Saladin turned a medieval army's greatest strength into its fatal weakness, and why the smartest tactical decision in Crusader history was the one they refused to make. Because the question isn't, how did Saladin win? It's, how did he make winning inevitable before a single sword was drawn? Summer, 1187. The Holy Land is a chessboard, and Saladin controls every piece that matters. For 88 years, the Crusader kingdom of Jerusalem had survived through a delicate balance. European knights held the cities, stone fortresses watched the roads, and whenever Muslim armies gathered, the Crusaders would mass their forces, find good ground near water, and wait. It was defensive, it was unglamorous, and it worked. But now everything is different. Saladin has done what no Muslim leader has accomplished in nearly a century. He's united Egypt, Syria, and Mesopotamia under one command. He controls the trade routes, he has unlimited manpower, and he has patience, the kind of patience that turns years into strategy. The Crusaders face an impossible situation. Defend everywhere? They don't have enough men. Concentrate their forces? That leaves castles unprotected and cities vulnerable. Attack Saladin directly? His army is larger, faster, and fights on home terrain. There are no good options, only less terrible ones. And the men who must choose between them? They can barely stand to be in the same room together. Meet the players. Because this isn't just a battle, it's a collision of egos that will kill a kingdom. King Guy of Jerusalem. Handsome, charismatic, absolutely in over his head. He wears the crown because he married the right woman, not because anyone believes he should lead. Half his nobles think he's a fool. The other half know it, but he's the king. And in 1187, that still means something. Raymond III of Tripoli, the veteran, the strategist, the man who understands Muslim tactics better than any Frank alive. He's fought Saladin before. He's negotiated with him. He knows exactly how dangerous this enemy is, and exactly how the Crusaders can survive. But there's a problem. Raymond recently made a truce with Saladin. His enemies call it treason. His friends call it pragmatism. Either way, it means half the army doesn't trust him. Reynald of Chatillon, the wild card, the pirate, the man who attacked Muslim pilgrims during a truce, raided caravans headed to Mecca, and allegedly threatened to dig up the Prophet Muhammad's body. Saladin has personally sworn to kill him, not defeat him. Kill him, with his own hands. Reynald doesn't care. Reynald has never cared, and his recklessness is about to cost everyone everything. The military orders, Templars, Hospitallers, the most disciplined, most fanatical, most effective fighting force in the Christian world. They don't retreat. They don't negotiate. They don't surrender. For them, death in battle against Muslims is the express lane to paradise. They're the Crusaders' greatest weapon. They're also the ones pushing hardest for aggressive action. These 4 factions hate each other almost as much as they hate Saladin. And Saladin? Saladin is counting on exactly that, late June, 1187. Saladin makes his move, but not the one anyone expects. He doesn't march on Jerusalem. He doesn't assault the coastal cities. Instead, he does something far more subtle. He attacks Tiberias. Why Tiberias? It's not the most important city. It's not the most strategic, but it belongs to Raymond of Tripoli. Raymond's wife, Esquiva, is trapped inside the citadel with a tiny garrison. Think about what Saladin has just done. He's created an impossible choice. Raymond, the man counseling caution, the man saying, "Don't march, don't take the bait," now has to watch his own city burn, his own wife besieged. If he keeps advising restraint, his enemies will call him a coward, a traitor, a man who abandoned his lady to save his own skin. And if the Crusaders march to save Tiberius, they have to cross 20 miles of waterless terrain in the July heat, in full armor, with Saladin's entire army waiting for them. This isn't a military attack. It's a psychological masterstroke. Saladin isn't trying to take Tiberius. He's using Tiberius to take the Crusader Army. July 2nd, 1187. The War Council at Sapphira. This is where the kingdom dies. The entire Crusader army has gathered at the springs of Sapphira. It's a strong position. Fresh water, good grazing for horses, defensible ground. If they stay here, Saladin has to come to them, and attacking a prepared Crusader army in a strong position is exactly the kind of fight he's spent his entire career avoiding. Raymond stands before the assembled lords, the man whose city is burning, the man whose wife is in chains, and he tells them, "Don't march." This is exactly what Saladin wants. He wants us to leave our water. He wants us to cross that open ground. Let him take Tiberius. Let him take my wife. I will rebuild the city. I will ransom the countess. But if we lose this army, we lose everything. Silence. Raymond is asking them to sacrifice his honor for their survival. He's admitting that his city, his wife, his reputation, all of it is worth less than keeping this army intact. It's the smartest tactical advice anyone will give in this entire campaign. And then Gerard de Riedfort speaks, the Grand Master of the Templars, the man who hates Raymond with a fury that borders on obsession. Years ago, Raymond promised Gerard a bride, then gave her to someone else. Gerard has never forgiven him. Now Gerard sees his chance. The Count of Tripoli wants us to hide behind walls while his city falls, while a Christian lady suffers in Muslim hands? This is the counsel of a coward, or worse, a traitor who made peace with Saladin while the rest of us prepared for war. The room shifts. You can feel it. Raymond's enemies lean forward. His allies look away. King Guy wavers. He knows Raymond is right. Everyone who understands warfare knows Raymond is right. But Guy is weak. Guy is insecure. And Guy cannot afford to look weak in front of his nobles. Pride, politics, personal vendettas. This is how kingdoms fall. That night, Gerard visits the king's tent alone. We don't know exactly what was said. The chronicles give us fragments, but we know the result. By morning, King Guy has changed his mind. The whole army will march, 16,000 men, 20 miles of wasteland, July heat, and every drop of water controlled by the enemy. Raymond receives the order in silence. What is there to say? He warned them. He begged them. He offered his own wife as the price of their survival. They're marching anyway. July 3rd, 1187. Dawn. The largest Crusader army ever assembled breaks camp and heads east toward Tiberius, toward Saladin, toward annihilation. And somewhere across those dry hills, watching the dust cloud rise, Saladin sees his trap closing. The Christians have done exactly what he needed them to do. They've left their water behind. Now he just has to make sure they never reach more. July 3rd, 1187. 4:20 a.m. The army stirs in darkness. 16,000 men rise before dawn. Knights buckle armor that will soon become ovens. Squires load pack horses with supplies that won't last the day. Infantry check their weapons, say their prayers, and fall into formation. No one speaks of what's coming, but everyone knows. 20 miles to Tiberius. 20 miles of exposed plateau, rocky valleys, and sun-blasted earth. 20 miles with no reliable water source until they reach the Sea of Galilee. In July, in armor, with the enemy watching every step. The army that leaves Safaraya is a masterpiece of medieval warfare. Heavy cavalry, knights in full chainmail on armored war horses, form the hammer. They're the knockout punch, the thunderbolt charge that has shattered Muslim armies for decades. Infantry with spears and crossbows form the shield. They protect the cavalry from harassment, create a wall of steel that mounted archers can't penetrate. The baggage train carries water, food, and arrows. It's the lifeline. Together, these elements are nearly invincible. The Crusaders have proven it, battle after battle. Stay in formation. Keep the infantry around the cavalry. Don't let the enemy separate your forces. And above all, stay near water. The system works. It has always worked. But it has one fatal weakness. It requires cohesion. The moment these elements separate, the moment knights charge without infantry support, or infantry drift away from cavalry protection, the whole machine breaks down. And Saladin knows this better than anyone alive. 6 Concert. AM. The march begins. The column stretches for miles. Raymond of Tripoli commands the vanguard. Bitter irony, leading men toward the city he tried to sacrifice. King Guy rides in the center with the true cross, the holiest relic in Christendom, carried by the Bishop of Acre. The Templars and Hospitallers guard the rear. For the first few miles, nothing happens. The silence is worse than combat. Every man strains his eyes towards the hills. Every man knows the enemy is out there, watching, waiting. When will it start? 8:10 a.m., first contact. They come out of the sun. Mounted archers, hundreds of them. They don't charge, they don't engage. They simply appear on the flanks, loose their arrows, and vanish before the Crusaders can respond. This is the beginning of the end. You need to understand what's happening here. Each individual arrow is almost meaningless. Knights in chainmail can survive dozens of hits. Even infantry can endure scattered harassment. But the arrows don't need to kill. They just need to wound. Slow down horses. Force the column to stop and dress ranks. Make men raise their shields. Shields that get heavier every hour under the burning sun. And most importantly, the arrows drain water. Every exertion requires drinking. Every wound requires cleaning. Every pause in the march means longer under the sun. Saladin's archers aren't trying to win a battle. They're conducting a slow-motion execution. The Crusaders push forward. What choice do they have? 10:04 a.m. The heat becomes a weapon. You've never experienced heat like this. Not really. None of us have. Imagine wearing 50 pounds of metal in direct sunlight. Chainmail absorbs heat. Helmets become cooking pots. The padding, beneath armor, meant to cushion blows, traps sweat against skin until men are literally stewing in their own fluids. Horses suffer worse. War horses carry hundreds of pounds of armored knight. They need water constantly. They're getting none. The army's pace slows. Men stumble. Horses stagger. The column begins to stretch as exhausted soldiers fall behind. And still, the arrows fall. The harassment never stops. Every time the army pauses to reform, Saladin's archers appear. Every time the rearguard tries to rest, they're attacked. Every time someone reaches for a water skin, they find it lighter than before. The Crusaders are dying of thirst in slow motion, and they're not even halfway to Tiberias. Noon. The springs at Turan. There's water here, not much, but enough. The army could stop, rest, refill their skins. They could wait out the worst of the heat and continue in the cooler evening. Raymond begs the king to halt. We cannot reach Tiberias today. Not in this heat. Not with this harassment. Let the men drink. Let the horses recover. We can finish the march tomorrow. It's the last chance. The final exit ramp before disaster. King Guy refuses. Why? The chronicles don't say. Maybe he fears looking weak. Maybe Gerard whispers more poison in his ear. Maybe he simply doesn't understand what's happening to his army. The column pushes past Turan, past the water. past their last hope. And now there's nothing between them and the Sea of Galilee but 9 miles of hell. 2:00 p.m. The trap is sprung. Saladin has been waiting for this moment. His main army appears. Not to attack, not yet. Just to block the road ahead. Thousands of horsemen spread across the plateau, cutting the direct route to Tiberias. The Crusaders can't go forward. They can't go back to Turan. Saladin's forces have closed behind them. They can't stay where they are. There's no water, no shade, no defensible position. They're suspended in the middle of a killing ground. And now, for the first time, Saladin increases the pressure. The harassment intensifies. Archers close to shorter range. More arrows, more wounds, more chaos. The rearguard, Templars and Hospitallers, fight constant running battles just to keep the column moving. But moving where? 4:04 p.m. Raymond makes a decision. The direct route to Tiberias is blocked. The army is dying. Something has to change. Raymond spots an alternative. The springs at Hattin, near a distinctive double-peaked hill called the Horns of Hattin. It's not the Sea of Galilee. It's not Tiberias, but it's water, and water means survival. He sends word to the king. Turn north toward the springs. King Guy agrees. What option is there? The army pivots. Exhausted men, dying horses, endless harassment, and now they're changing direction, adding distance, extending their agony. But there's water at Hattin. If they can reach it, if Saladin lets them reach it, he won't. 6 p.m. The springs are dry. Not dry from drought. Dry because Saladin got there first. His men blocked the springs, diverted them, poisoned them. The water the Crusaders are marching toward, the water they've staked everything on, doesn't exist anymore. The army reaches the base of the Horns of Hattin as the sun begins to set. No water, no relief, no hope. Raymond rides to the king. His face tells the story before his words do. The springs are taken. We must try for the lake tomorrow at dawn. If we stay here... He doesn't finish. He doesn't need to. King Guy looks at his army. Men collapsed on the ground, horses standing motionless, too weak to graze. Knights so dehydrated they can barely hold their weapons. They cannot go forward. They cannot go back. They cannot reach water. The king gives the only order he can. Make camp. 9:00 p.m. The night of hell begins. This is when Saladin shows his genius for psychological warfare. As darkness falls, his men encircle the Crusader camp. Completely. Torches flicker in every direction. There is no escape route. No gap. In the ring. Nowhere to run. And then they start the fires. The brush around Hattin is dry. July dry, desert dry, burns like paper dry. Saladin's men ignite it. Walls of flame sweep across the plateau. Smoke rolls over the Crusader camp in choking waves. Men who haven't had water in 12 hours now breathe ash and heat. But the fires are just the beginning. All night long, Saladin's army makes noise. Drums, horns, war cries, prayers. They want the Crusaders to hear them. They want them to know they're surrounded. They want them to spend the darkness listening to 20,000 enemies preparing to kill them. No one sleeps. No one can sleep. Knights sit in the darkness, lips cracked, tongues swollen, and listen to their doom approaching with the dawn. Somewhere in that camp, Raymond of Tripoli sits alone. What do you think about on the night before you die? When you warned them and they didn't listen? When you offered your wife and your honor as sacrifice and they marched anyway? Does he think about Ashiva, still trapped in Tiberias? Does he wonder if she'll survive when the kingdom falls? Does he pray? Does he curse? Does he simply stare into the darkness and wait? We'll never know. The chronicles don't tell us. But Raymond knows what's coming. He's the only one who ever really understood. Tomorrow the Crusader army dies, and there's nothing anyone can do to stop it. Midnight. Saladin's camp. The Muslim commanders gather for final orders. They've barely fought today. Their horses are fresh. Their men are rested and well-watered. They've been watching the Crusaders destroy themselves for 18 hours. Saladin gives his instructions. At dawn, the attack begins. But this won't be a battle. It will be a harvest. The Christians are already broken. Dehydration has done what swords never could. Tomorrow is simply collecting. Saladin looks toward the Crusader camp. The glow of dying fires. The silence of exhausted men. 88 years of Christian presence in the Holy Land. Ending tonight, not with a battle, with a march. July 4th, 1187. Dawn. The sun rises over the Horns of Hattin like an executioner lifting his blade. 16,000 men stir from a night without sleep. Their tongues are leather. Their eyes are crusted with smoke and dust. Some can barely stand. Others can't stand at all. This is the army that will fight today. This is what remains of Crusader power in the Holy Land. And across the plateau, fresh and rested and watered, Saladin's army begins to move. 5 Akobors M. The final council. King Guy gathers his commanders. There are no good options. There haven't been good options since they left Safaria, but they have to do something. Raymond speaks. His voice is hoarse. Everyone's voice is hoarse, but his mind is still clear. The lake. We must reach the Sea of Galilee. It's 4 miles northeast. If we can break through to the water, we can reform. We can fight. We can survive. 4 miles. 1 hour's march under normal conditions. But nothing is normal now. Between them and the lake stands Saladin's entire army. King Guy nods. What choice is there? The order goes out. Prepare to march. Form battle order. Infantry screen the cavalry. Templars and Hospitallers to the rear. The true cross in the center. One final push. Everything they have left. 4 miles to salvation, or 4 miles to annihilation. 6 a.m. The march begins. It ends almost immediately. The army lurches forward. Exhausted infantry stumble into formation. Dehydrated knights mount horses that can barely walk. Saladin's archers open fire. This isn't harassment anymore. This is saturation. Thousands of arrows blacken the sky. The sound is like rain. If rain could kill. The infantry raise their shields. The formation holds. Barely. The army pushes forward. One step, another, and then the infantry see the lake. This is the moment everything breaks. You need to understand what happens next. These aren't cowards. These aren't untrained peasants. These are professional soldiers who fought Muslims for years. They've held discipline under fire. They've maintained formations against cavalry charges. But they haven't had water in 20 hours. And now, shimmering in the morning light, they can see the Sea of Galilee. They can see salvation. They can see life itself, blue and beautiful and 4 miles away. Something snaps. The infantry surge forward, not in formation, not in order. They surge like men possessed, like dying animals smelling water. They break away from the cavalry they're supposed to protect. They scramble uphill toward a plateau that they hope, will give them a clear path to the lake. They're heading for the Horns of Hattin, the twin peaks rising above the battlefield, and they're leaving the knights completely exposed. Raymond of Tripoli sees it happening. From the vanguard, he watches the army tear itself apart. Infantry streaming uphill, cavalry milling in confusion below. The screen that protects the knights dissolving like morning mist. This is the nightmare. This is exactly what he warned them about. Separation. The one thing the Crusader system cannot survive. "Form up," he screams. "Hold formation." No one listens. No one can listen. Discipline requires thought, and these men are beyond thought. They're beyond everything except the desperate animal need for water. The army fractures, infantry up the hill, cavalry on the plain below. The connection between them severed, and Saladin, watching from his command post, gives the order his men have waited all night to hear. Attack! 7:00 a.m., the cavalry engagement begins. With the infantry gone, Saladin's mounted forces close for the kill. This should be the Crusaders' moment. Heavy cavalry charges are their specialty. Their entire military doctrine is built around the devastating impact of knights in full gallop. But a charge requires formation. A charge requires coordination. A charge requires fresh horses and hydrated riders. They have none of these things. The knights spur their dying horses forward. Some manage a canter. Some barely achieve a trot. The thunderbolt charge that shattered Muslim armies at Montgizard, at Arsuf, at a dozen other battles. It doesn't come. Saladin's cavalry flows around them like water around stones. They don't meet the charge head-on. They don't need to. They simply evade, circle, and shoot. More arrows. More wounds. More horses falling. The knights fight brilliantly. Of course they do. These are the finest warriors in Christendom. Templars and Hospitallers carve paths through enemy formations with sword and lance. Individual feats of heroism that would be legendary, if anyone survived to tell the stories. But individual heroism doesn't matter when the system is broken. On the Horns of Hattin, the infantry make their last stand. Thousands of foot soldiers have scrambled to the hilltop. They can see the lake from here, so close, so impossibly close. But between them and that water stands an army, and they have no cavalry support, no way to break through, no way to retreat. Saladin doesn't even need to attack them. He just needs to wait. Some infantry try to surrender. They throw down their weapons, raise their hands, beg for water. Saladin's men accept some surrenders. They refuse others. The randomness is its own cruelty. Others keep fighting. What else can they do? They form circles, shields outward, and wait for the inevitable. The Muslim archers don't rush. They have all day. They fire volley after volley into the packed mass of desperate men. The Horns of Hattin become a slaughterhouse. 8:01 a.m. Raymond attempts the impossible. The vanguard is the only Crusader unit still in formation. Raymond's discipline, Raymond's veterans, Raymond's iron will. They've held together while everything else collapsed. Raymond sees one chance, a thin spot in Saladin's lines, a gap that might allow a breakthrough to the lake. He gives the order to charge. The vanguard surges forward. This is a real charge. Fresh enough horses, disciplined enough riders. The impact scatters Saladin's forces. For one moment there's daylight, open ground, a path to salvation. And Raymond takes it. The vanguard breaks through. They're clear. They've escaped the trap. But when Raymond looks back, he sees the truth. The gap has closed behind him. King Guy, the True Cross, the Templars, the Hospitallers, they're still trapped, still surrounded, still dying. Did Raymond abandon them? Did he see an opportunity for the whole army that only his vanguard could exploit? Or did he simply save himself while his comrades perished? We'll never know. Raymond will die within months, broken by illness and grief. He'll never explain. He'll never defend himself. But in this moment, riding away from Hattin with his vanguard intact, Raymond of Tripoli becomes the only Crusader commander to escape the trap. The trap he told them never to enter. 9 a.m. The end approaches. King Guy has rallied what remains around the True Cross. The relic is a beacon, spiritual power made visible. As long as the cross stands, the army has a center, a purpose, a reason to fight. Saladin recognizes this. Of course he does. He directs his best troops toward the red tent that marks the king's position, toward the cross. The fighting here is apocalyptic. Templars and Hospitallers throw themselves at the Muslim lines in suicidal charges. They know they're dying. They don't care. Death in battle against the enemies of Christ is what they've trained for their entire lives. Bodies pile around the royal standard, Christian and Muslim together, tangled in death. The True Cross falls. Not the first time. The Crusaders recover it. Not the second time. They recover it again. The third time, it stays down. A Crusader knight named Guy of Senlis, wounded and exhausted, manages to raise the cross one final time. He holds it aloft with bleeding hands. An arrow finds his throat. The cross falls into Muslim hands. The psychological impact is instantaneous. The true cross isn't just a relic. It's proof of God's favor. It's the visible sign that Christ himself fights alongside the Crusaders. And now it belongs to Saladin, men who've fought for hours, who've endured torture by thirst and fire and steel. They break, not physically, spiritually. If God has abandoned them, why keep fighting? Pockets of resistance collapse across the battlefield. Knights throw down their weapons. Infantry stop even pretending to hold formation. The Battle of Hattin is over. What comes next is simply collection. 10 a.m. The king falls. Guy de Lusignan, king of Jerusalem, is found sitting on the ground near his fallen tent. Not fighting, not fleeing, just sitting. Dehydration does this. It destroys the ability to think, to act, to do anything except exist. The king of Jerusalem has been reduced to a husk, waiting for someone to tell him what happens next. Saladin's men bring him water. Think about that. After everything, after the march, the night of hell, the battle, Saladin gives the king water. Guy drinks desperately. He passes the cup to Renaud of Chatillon, who drinks as well. Saladin watches. "The king gave that cup," he says. "Not me." It's a significant distinction. In Arab tradition, giving a captive food or drink grants them protection. Saladin has just signaled that one of these men will live, and one will not. Saladin's tent. The moment of reckoning. King Guy and Renaud of Chatillon kneel before the Sultan. Two men who ruled the Holy Land this morning. Two prisoners who will learn their fates in the next few minutes. Saladin looks at Guy, the weak king, the man who ignored good counsel and marched his army to destruction. Saladin feels something close to pity. "Kings do not kill kings," he says. Guy will live. He'll be ransomed eventually, returned to what remains of his kingdom. His punishment is survival, living with the knowledge of what his pride has cost. Then Saladin turns to Renaud. This is different. This is personal. For years, Renaud has violated truces. He's attacked pilgrim caravans heading to Mecca. He's raided Muslim shipping in the Red Sea. He once announced plans to march on Medina itself, to desecrate the tomb of the Prophet Muhammad. Saladin swore an oath. If he ever captured Renaud, he would kill him with his own hands. "How many times have you sworn oaths and violated them?" Saladin asks. "How many times have you signed agreements you never meant to keep?" Renaud's response. The chronicles vary. Some say he was defiant. Some say he begged. Some say he simply stared, too exhausted for fear. It doesn't matter. Saladin draws his sword. He strikes Renaud across the shoulder. A wound, not a killing blow. His guards finish the execution. Renaud of Chatillon, the man whose recklessness ignited the war, dies on the floor of Saladin's tent. King Guy watches, trembling. Saladin notices. "This man was killed only because of his maleficence," the Sultan says. "A king does not kill a king, but that man, he transgressed his limits." The message is clear. Some prisoners will be spared, others will not, and the sorting is about to begin. The executions. Saladin gathers the captured Templars and Hospitallers, nearly 200 knights, the elite of the elite, the most dangerous Christian warriors in the world. He offers them a choice: convert to Islam or die. They choose death, almost to a man. Saladin doesn't use his soldiers for the executions. Instead, he invites the Sufi scholars and religious men in his camp to perform the killings. Holy men with swords, executing holy warriors. The chronicles describe the scene with uncomfortable honesty. Some of the executioners are skilled, quick, clean deaths. Others are not. Some Templars die with single strokes. Others suffer. By nightfall, the military orders that have terrorized Muslim armies for decades are effectively destroyed. Why does Saladin spare the politicians but kill the warriors? This isn't cruelty, it's strategy. King Guy can be ransomed. He can be released to cause chaos among the surviving Franks. A weak king leading a broken kingdom serves Saladin's purposes far better than a martyr. But the Templars, the Hospitallers, these men don't ransom, they don't negotiate, they don't retire. If Saladin releases them, they'll find new swords and new horses and return to kill Muslims within months. They're too dangerous to live, too valuable to ransom, too fanatical to convert. So they die. It's ruthless, it's logical, it's exactly the kind of calculation that makes Saladin the most effective Muslim commander in a century. The numbers are staggering. 16,000 Crusaders marched from Safaria by sunset on July 4th. Dead on the battlefield. Thousands. The exact count is impossible. Bodies litter the slopes of Hattin, the plateau below, the routes of failed escape attempts. Captured, nearly everyone else. Knights, infantry, sergeants, servants, the entire military strength of the Kingdom of Jerusalem, taken in a single afternoon. Escaped, Raymond's vanguard, a few hundred men who broke through early and fled to Tyre. That's it. That's all. The true cross, in Saladin's possession. It will be paraded through Damascus, displayed as proof of Muslim triumph. The Crusaders will never recover it. And here's the number that matters most. The Kingdom of Jerusalem now has no field army. None. Every castle, every city, every fortress in the realm. They drew their garrisons from this army. Hattin wasn't just a battle. It was the destruction of the entire Crusader military system. The dominoes begin to fall. Think about medieval defense. A castle's strength isn't just its walls. It's the threat of a relief force. Attack a fortress, and you have to worry about an army arriving to trap you against those same walls you're assaulting. After Hattin, there is no relief force. There is no army. There is nothing. Saladin doesn't need to storm castles. He just needs to show up. Acre, the greatest port in the kingdom, surrenders on July 10th. 6 days after Hattin, Nablus falls, Jaffa falls, Sidon falls, Beirut falls. Ascalon, one of the most heavily fortified cities in the realm, surrenders in September after minimal resistance. The castles and cities that took the First Crusade years of bloody conquest to capture? They fall in weeks, sometimes days, sometimes without a single arrow being fired. Because there's no one left to defend them. Everyone died at Hattin. September 1187. Saladin reaches Jerusalem, the holy city, the prize that launched 100,000 Europeans on crusade, the city that has flown Christian banners for 88 years. Its walls are strong, its defenses are intact. But inside? Women, children, elderly, priests, a handful of knights who escaped the disaster, the refugee population from every town and castle that has already fallen. Balian of Ibelin commands the defense. He's a competent lord, maybe the only one left. He looks at his garrison and does the math. 2 knights. 2. In a city that needs hundreds. Bolian knights, every boy over 16. Every merchant's son who can hold a sword. Every squire and servant who's ever touched a weapon. It doesn't matter. They all know it doesn't matter. The siege lasts 12 days. Saladin's engineers undermine the walls. They open a breach near the gate of the column. The city cannot hold. Balian negotiates. This is the moment when Saladin could have his vengeance. When the First Crusade took Jerusalem in 1099, the Crusaders massacred every Muslim and Jew in the city. Rivers of blood flowed through the streets. The killing lasted 2 days. The Muslim world has never forgotten. Never. And now Saladin has the chance to repay that slaughter 100-fold. He doesn't take it. Instead, he offers terms. the Christian population can ransom themselves, 10 dinars for a man, 5 for a woman, 1 for a child. Those who can pay leave freely. Those who cannot will be enslaved but not killed. Balian bargains. He raises the ransom money from the treasury. He begs Saladin for mercy toward those too poor to pay. Saladin frees thousands without payment. His own brother purchases 1,000 more and sets them free. When the Christian population marches out of Jerusalem on October 2nd, 1187, they leave alive, humiliated, dispossessed, but breathing. The contrast with 1099 could not be sharper. October 2nd, 1187, the cross comes down from the Dome of the Rock. For 88 years, Christians have worshipped in Jerusalem's holiest sites. The Dome of the Rock, built over the spot where Muhammad ascended to heaven, has served as a church. Saladin's men remove the Christian altars. They wash the stones with rosewater. The call to prayer sounds over Jerusalem for the first time in nearly a century. The Crusader kingdom of Jerusalem still exists, technically, a thin strip of coastal cities, Tyre, Tripoli, Antioch, clings to the Mediterranean. A few defiant castles hold out in the hills. But Jerusalem is gone. The true cross is gone. The army is gone. And all of it traces back to one decision. One march. One morning when King Guy ignored Raymond's warning and led his men away from water. The news reaches Europe like a thunderbolt. Pope Urban III allegedly dies of shock when he hears the report. His successor immediately calls for a new crusade, the Third Crusade. The famous one, Richard the Lionheart, Philip of France, Frederick Barbarossa, the largest military expedition since Hattin marches east to reclaim what was lost. They'll recapture some coastal cities. They'll fight Saladin to a standstill at Arsuf and Jaffa. Richard will prove himself one of the great battlefield commanders of the medieval world. But they'll never retake Jerusalem. Not Richard. Not anyone. Not for another 40 years, and then only through diplomacy, not conquest. Hattin's shadow stretches across centuries. And what of the men who made it happen? King Guy survives. He's ransomed, released, and eventually becomes King of Cyprus, a consolation prize for the man who lost Jerusalem. He dies in 1194, largely forgotten. Raymond of Tripoli escapes the battle, but not his fate. He dies within months, consumed by illness and what the chronicles call grief. Grief for his kingdom. Grief for his warnings ignored. Grief for the validation that came too late and cost too much. Gerard de Riedfort, the Grand Master who poisoned Guy's ear and pushed for the march. He survives Hattin somehow, captured and ransomed. He'll die 2 years later at the Siege of Acre, still fighting, still reckless. Saladin lives another 6 years. He watches Richard's crusade batter against his conquests, holds most of what he's won, and dies in 1193 with almost nothing in his treasury. He gave it all away. Charity, gifts, the expenses of endless warfare. When his servants inventory his possessions after death, they find the Sultan owns 1 piece of gold and 40 pieces of silver, not enough to pay for his own funeral. So what actually happened at Hattin? Strip away the drama, ignore the personalities, forget the religious significance for a moment. What you have is a case study in how to win a war without winning a battle. Saladin didn't defeat the Crusaders at Hattin. The battle itself was barely a contest. By the time swords clashed on July 4th, the outcome was already determined. The Crusaders lost at Hattin because they lost before Hattin. They lost when they left their water. They lost when they ignored their best strategist. They lost when pride and politics overrode military logic. Saladin's genius wasn't tactical, it was strategic. He understood something that most commanders never grasp. The best battle is the one your enemy has already lost before it begins. The Tiberius Gambit, look at it again. Saladin didn't attack Tiberius because he wanted Tiberius. He attacked Tiberius because it belonged to Raymond. He knew Raymond would counsel restraint. He knew Raymond's enemies would call that cowardice. He knew the political fault lines in the Crusader leadership would crack under pressure. So he applied pressure. Not military pressure, psychological pressure. He made it impossible for Raymond to argue for caution without appearing to sacrifice his own wife. He gave Gerard de Riedfort ammunition. He created conditions where the rational choice looked like the dishonorable choice, and the Crusaders, being human, chose honor over reason. They marched, the harassment campaign. Look at it again. Saladin's mounted archers didn't try to destroy the Crusader army on July 3rd. They couldn't have. The Crusader formation was too strong, their discipline too solid. Instead, the archers did something more subtle. They made the march take longer. They forced constant vigilance. They drained water and energy without ever committing to a real engagement. Every arrow was a withdrawal from a bank account that had no deposits coming. By nightfall on July 3rd, Saladin hadn't killed many Crusaders, but he'd killed their ability to fight the next day. The water denial. Look at it again. This is the master stroke. This is what makes Hattin a study in military academies 8 centuries later. Saladin didn't just block the route to Tiberias. He controlled every water source in the operational area. The springs at Hattin, blocked. The approaches to the Sea of Galilee, guarded. Even the small wells and seasonal streams, watched and denied. He turned geography into a weapon. The Crusaders' heavy cavalry was the most powerful military force in the medieval world. But horses need water. Knights need water. The entire system that made Crusader armies invincible required logistical support. Take away the water, and the system collapses. Saladin didn't defeat the Crusader army. He defeated the Crusader army's requirements. He attacked the logistics, not the soldiers. And that's a lesson that applies far beyond 1187. Why does this battle still matter? Hattin is studied at West Point, at Sandhurst, at military academies around the world. Not because it was a great battle, it wasn't. The actual fighting was one-sided slaughter. It's studied because of what came before. Every officer learns the same lesson. Battles are won and lost before they begin. Logistics determines outcomes. Strategic positioning trumps tactical skill. The army that controls the terms of engagement controls the result. Saladin controlled the terms. He chose when. He chose where. He chose the conditions. The Crusaders thought they were marching to battle. They were actually marching into a pre-designed kill zone. By the time they realized it, they were already dead. The broader principle: force your enemy to fight your kind of battle, not theirs. The Crusaders were unbeatable in their kind of battle. Defensive position, adequate water, infantry screens protecting cavalry, time to rest and organize. Under those conditions, they'd defeated Muslim armies repeatedly for decades. Saladin made sure those conditions never existed. He didn't try to beat the Crusaders at their own game. He changed the game entirely. He made them play his game, a game of mobility, harassment, and resource denial, a game where their strengths became irrelevant and their weaknesses became fatal. That's not just medieval strategy, that's eternal strategy. Every successful commander in history has understood some version of this principle. Don't fight the enemy where they're strong. Change the battlefield until their strength doesn't matter. Saladin did it with water and terrain. Others have done it with technology, or timing, or information, or economics. The principle remains constant. The tragedy of Raymond. There's a human cost to this story that military analysis can't capture. Raymond of Tripoli understood everything. He saw the trap. He knew the danger. He literally offered his own wife as a sacrifice to prevent the march. And no one listened. Imagine knowing the right answer, knowing it with absolute certainty, and watching everyone choose the wrong one anyway. Imagine being called a coward and a traitor for trying to save them. Imagine escaping the disaster and knowing that your survival looks like betrayal. Raymond lived 4 months after Hattin. The chronicles say he died of illness, but they also say he died of grief. Some wounds don't come from swords. The tragedy of the kingdom. 88 years. 3 generations of Crusader families had been born in the Holy Land. They'd built cities and castles and churches. They'd raised children and buried parents in soil they considered their own. Gone in a single summer. The people who survived Hattin, the refugees who streamed out of Jerusalem, the women and children ransomed and released. Where did they go? Some to Tyre, some to Cyprus, some all the way back to Europe, to countries their families had left a century before. They were strangers everywhere, not quite European anymore, not welcome in their former homes. The Crusader states would limp on for another century, but they'd never recover the strength or the confidence they had before July 4th, 1187. Hattin didn't just destroy an army, it destroyed a world. And yet, Saladin showed something at Jerusalem that's worth remembering. He could have massacred the Christian population. No one would have blamed him. The precedent of 1099 demanded it. His own soldiers expected it. He chose mercy instead. Not complete mercy. Thousands were still enslaved. But compared to what the Crusaders did, compared to what anyone expected, Saladin's treatment of Jerusalem's population was remarkable. Why? Maybe political calculation. Living Christians could be ransomed. Living Christians told stories of Saladin's generosity that enhanced his reputation throughout the world. Maybe genuine principle. Saladin was a devout Muslim who took his faith seriously. Islamic law has protections for conquered peoples. He followed them. Maybe both. Maybe the line between strategy and ethics was never as clear as we pretend. Either way, the contrast matters. In a story full of slaughter and destruction, there's at least one moment of restraint. It doesn't redeem the violence, but it complicates the narrative. History usually does. The final question. What would have happened if they'd listened to Raymond? If King Guy had held his position at Sapphira? If he'd let Tiberius fall and ransomed Shiva later? If he'd forced Saladin to attack him in a strong defensive position with adequate water? Maybe Saladin wins anyway. He had more men. He had more resources. He had time on his side. But maybe not. Maybe a single defensive victory breaks his coalition. Maybe his emirs grow tired of waiting and go home. Maybe the Crusaders survive another decade, another generation. We'll never know. Because they didn't listen. Raymond of Tripoli knew, he told them, and they marched anyway. Because sometimes in history, the losing move isn't what you do on the battlefield. It's showing up to the battlefield at all. Hattin wasn't a battle. It was an execution, and Saladin signed the death warrant before the first sword was ever drawn.